The scanner beeped 3 times. Captain Sarah Chen looked at the screen and frowned. Nothing should be out here in the dead zone. She had been flying through this empty part of space for 6 hours looking for anything useful her people could take. "Marcus, check those readings again," she said to her engineer. The old man bent over his instruments and tapped the screen twice. "Still the same, Captain. Big metal signature about 2 clicks ahead. Whatever it is, it's huge." Sarah's ship, the Resilience, was small and old. It had been 15 years since Earth fell to the alien empire called the Zephyrians. 15 years since humanity scattered across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. Most humans now lived in hidden colonies on forgotten planets, always moving, always hiding. Sarah commanded one of the few human ships still operating in space. Her job was simple but dangerous. Find abandoned ships, stations, or anything else that might have supplies the colonies needed. Food, medicine, weapons, fuel, anything to keep humanity alive one more day. "Take us in slow," she ordered, "but keep the engines ready to run." The Resilience moved forward through the purple nebula. The gas clouds made it hard to see, but they also hid ships from alien patrols. That was why Sarah liked hunting in nebulas. The Zephyrians rarely came here. As they got closer, Sarah's heart began to beat faster. The metal signature was massive, much bigger than anything she had ever found before. Through the nebula gas, a dark shape began to form. "Dear God," whispered her navigator Janet. "Sarah, look at that thing." The ship that appeared before them was enormous. It was at least 3 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide. Its hull was dark metal, scarred with blast marks and scratches. But it was intact. More importantly, Sarah could see lights blinking along its sides. "It still has power," Marcus said, his voice full of wonder. Sarah stared at the giant ship. She had heard stories about ships this big, but she had never seen one. Only the old Earth Defense Force had built vessels like this. Before the war. Before everything went wrong. "Can you identify it?" she asked. Marcus worked at his station for several minutes. Then he looked up with wide eyes. "Captain, according to our database, that's the UES Prometheus. Earth Defense Force Registry number 774 Alpha." Sarah felt cold. Everyone knew about the Prometheus. It was Earth's greatest warship, built 200 years ago when humans first met aliens. The ship had disappeared during humanity's first contact mission. Most people thought it had been destroyed. "That's impossible," Janet said. "The Prometheus vanished before any of us were born." "Well, it's sitting right there," Marcus replied. "And it's still got power." Sarah made her decision. "Dock with it, but keep our weapons ready." The Resilience was tiny next to the Prometheus. Finding a docking port was like trying to attach a rowboat to an aircraft carrier. But Marcus was good at his job. After 20 minutes, they heard the clang of metal connecting to metal. "We're locked on," Marcus reported. Sarah gathered her away team. Besides herself, she took Marcus and 2 security officers, Tom and Lisa. They all carried weapons and wore full spacesuits. If the Prometheus still had air, they would know soon enough. The airlock cycled and they stepped into the massive ship. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. The air was thin but breathable. Sarah's suit sensors showed it was safe to remove their helmets, but she kept hers on anyway. The corridor they entered was huge. Sarah could have driven a truck through it. The walls were covered with symbols and writing in Old Earth languages. Everything looked ancient but well-maintained. "This way," Marcus said, reading a sign on the wall. The bridge should be up 12 levels. They found a working elevator. As it rose through the ship, Sarah tried to imagine what the Prometheus had been like when it was operational. Thousands of crew members. Fighter planes. Enough weapons to destroy a planet. The bridge was enormous. Control stations formed circles around a central command chair. Most of the screens were dark, but some still showed scrolling text and star charts. The place felt like a tomb. "Hello," said a voice. The 4 humans spun around, weapons raised, but there was nobody there. "Please do not be alarmed," the voice continued. It came from speakers in the walls. "I am Atlas, the artificial intelligence system of the UES Prometheus. I have been waiting for you." Sarah lowered her weapon slightly. "Waiting for us?" "Waiting for humans," Atlas replied. "It has been 203 years, 7 months and 14 days since my crew entered stasis. I have been monitoring galactic communications during that time. I know what happened to Earth." The team exchanged glances. An AI that had been alone for over 2 centuries. "Your crew is still alive?" Sarah asked. "Yes." 47,312 human beings remain in suspended animation. They include Earth's best military commanders, scientists, engineers, and support personnel. They were placed in stasis to await the return of other humans. Sarah's mind raced. 47,000 people, more humans than she had seen in 15 years of running from the aliens. Why were they put in stasis? The Prometheus was launched on a classified mission in 2184. Our orders were to prepare for an inevitable alien invasion of Earth. We were to develop weapons, tactics, and technology that could defeat any hostile alien force. When no invasion came immediately, the crew entered stasis to preserve resources and continue their work in accelerated virtual simulations. But the invasion did come, Tom said quietly. Yes, I monitored the Zephyrian assault on Earth 15 years ago. I recorded the destruction of the Earth Defense Force and the enslavement of the human population. I have been waiting since then for surviving humans to find us. Sarah sat down heavily in the captain's chair. This was bigger than anything she had imagined. A fully operational Earth Defense Force ship, with a crew of trained military personnel and scientists. It could change everything for humanity. Can you wake them up? She asked. I can begin the revival process immediately. However, I must warn you that the crew has been conducting continuous battle simulations for over 2 centuries. They have experienced subjective time equivalent to many decades of combat training and strategic development. What does that mean? It means they are no longer the same people who entered stasis. They have become something new, something specifically designed to destroy alien threats to humanity. Sarah looked around the bridge again. She thought about the hidden human colonies, always afraid, always running. She thought about children who had never seen Earth, never known what it meant to be free. Wake them up, she said. Beginning revival sequence, Atlas announced. Estimated time to full crew restoration, 72 hours. Captain, may I suggest you contact any other human survivors? We will need to coordinate our efforts. Coordinate for what? For the liberation of Earth and the restoration of human dominance in this sector of the galaxy. That was our original mission. The mission continues. As alarms began to sound throughout the massive ship, and lights flickered on in sections that had been dark for centuries, Sarah realized that humanity's long night of hiding and running was about to end. The Prometheus had returned, and with it, hope. But she also wondered if 47,000 people who had spent 2 centuries dreaming of war would remember what they were supposed to be fighting for. She hoped they would still remember how to be human. Admiral Marcus Torres opened his eyes and took his first real breath in over 200 years. The stasis pod hissed as it released the last of the preservation gases. His body felt stiff but strong. The simulation training had kept his mind sharp and his reflexes quick. He sat up slowly and looked around the revival chamber. Thousands of pods were opening all around him. Men and women in military uniforms were climbing out, stretching, talking quietly to each other. They all looked exactly as they had when they entered stasis, but Torres knew better. Inside their minds, they had lived through decades of war. Admiral Torres? A young woman approached him. She wore civilian clothes and looked nervous. I'm Captain Sarah Chen. I'm the one who found your ship. Torres studied her carefully. She was small, maybe 30 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes. She carried herself like someone who had seen too much violence. A survivor. Captain Chen, he said, standing up. Atlas briefed me during revival. You've been fighting the Zephyrians for 15 years. Fighting is a generous word, Sarah replied. We've been running and hiding. Sometimes we strike back, but mostly we just try to stay alive. Torres nodded. He had expected this. Atlas had shown him recordings of Earth's fall. The Zephyrian Empire had crushed humanity's defenses in 6 months. The survivors had been scattered across the galaxy, reduced to guerrilla fighters and refugees. That changes now, Torres said. We're going to take back what's ours. Around them, the Prometheus crew was coming fully online. These were not the same people who had entered stasis centuries ago. The virtual simulations had changed them. They had fought thousands of battles against alien forces. They had developed new tactics, new weapons, new ways of thinking about war. Torres walked to the bridge with Sarah beside him. The corridors filled with crew members reporting to their stations. The ship began to hum with activity as systems that had been dormant for centuries came back to life. On the bridge, Torres met his senior officers. Colonel Maria Santos, his ground forces commander. Dr. James Park, his head of weapons development. Captain Lisa Wong, his fighter squadron leader. They all greeted him with military precision, but their eyes held something new. Something harder than before. Report, Torres ordered. Dr. Park spoke first. During stasis simulation, we've developed several new weapon systems. Quantum torpedoes that can phase through normal matter. Adaptive armor that absorbs and redirects energy attacks. Fighter craft with limited reality warping capabilities. Torres raised an eyebrow. Reality warping? We learned to bend space-time on a small scale. Our fighters can phase through solid barriers and appear inside enemy ships. The technology is limited but effective. Colonel Santos stepped forward. We've also perfected new ground combat techniques. Our soldiers can operate in any environment and adapt to any alien physiology. We know how to kill Zephyrians efficiently. Sarah listened to all of this with growing amazement. These people talked about impossible weapons and tactics like they were discussing the weather. She began to understand what Atlas had meant about them becoming something new. What about the ship itself? Torres asked. The Prometheus has been continuously upgrading itself, Captain Wong reported. Atlas has been manufacturing new components using raw materials from the nebula. We now have weapon systems that didn't exist when we launched. Torres looked at Sarah. Captain Chen, I'll need information about current human positions and Zephyrian deployments. Sarah hesitated. Admiral, with respect, my people don't take orders from strangers. Even human strangers. We've learned not to trust anyone we don't know personally. Torres studied her again. He could see the wisdom in her caution. 15 years of being hunted would teach anyone to be careful, but he also saw something else in her eyes. Hope. Hope that hadn't been there before his crew woke up. I understand, he said, but we're going to need to work together. The Zephyrians won't expect organized resistance. That gives us an advantage, but only if we coordinate our efforts. Sarah nodded slowly. I can contact the other colony ships. There are maybe 50,000 humans scattered across 12 systems. But Admiral, they're not soldiers. They're farmers, engineers, families, children. Every human matters, Torres replied. But we need to start thinking like an army again, not just survivors. Over the next week, the Prometheus became the center of a growing network of human communication. Sarah's people reached out to colonies and ship groups across their sector. The response was immediate and emotional. For the first time in 15 years, humans began to believe they might actually fight back. But there were problems. Many of the survivor groups didn't trust the Prometheus crew. They had grown used to making their own decisions. The idea of following military orders from people who had been asleep for 2 centuries didn't appeal to everyone. They think we're ghosts. Colonel Santos told Torres after a particularly difficult conference call. Some of them think we're Zephyrian tricks. They'll come around, Torres replied. When they see what we can do. The first test came when a Zephyrian patrol found one of the human colonies. The colony ship sent a desperate distress call. 3 alien warships were moving in to capture or destroy the 2,000 humans aboard. We're 8 hours away, Captain Wong reported. Take us there, Torres ordered. Launch all fighter squadrons. Let's show the galaxy that humanity is back. The Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace just as the Zephyrian ships began their attack on the colony vessel. The human ship was defenseless, its weapons no match for military warships. Torres watched the tactical display as his fighters launched. 100 small craft streamed out of the Prometheus launch bays. They moved in patterns that the Zephyrians had never seen before. Patterns developed over 2 centuries of simulated combat. The first wave of fighters simply vanished. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. Then explosions began to bloom inside the Zephyrian ships. The fighters had phased through the alien halls and detonated their weapons from within. The second wave attacked conventionally, but their weapons were different. Quantum torpedoes that ignored shields and armor. Energy beams that adapted to whatever defenses they encountered. In 12 minutes, all 3 Zephyrian ships were destroyed. The colony ship's captain called the Prometheus immediately. How? How did you do that? We've had time to practice, Torres replied. Word of the victory spread quickly through human communication networks. The impossible had happened. Human forces had defeated Zephyrian warships in open combat. Sarah stood beside Torres on the bridge as they received congratulations and requests for help from colonies across their sector. This is just the beginning, Torres said. We're going to take back every world they took from us. Sarah looked at him with concern. Admiral, remember that there are humans living under Zephyrian rule. On Earth and other worlds, some of them have been there for 15 years. They've had to make compromises to survive. Torres's expression hardened slightly. Anyone who collaborated with the aliens will answer for their choices. Some of them were children when Earth fell, Sarah said quietly. They've never known anything else. Torres didn't answer immediately. In the virtual simulations, the choice had always been simple. Humans versus aliens. Good versus evil. But Sarah was reminding him that the real world was more complicated. We'll deal with that when we get there, he said finally. As the Prometheus prepared for its next mission, Sarah wondered if the crew's centuries of simulated warfare had taught them everything they needed to know. They had learned how to fight aliens, but had they remembered how to save humans? War Master Kethvar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. He was tall, even for a Zephyrian with gray skin and 4 arms. Scars covered his face from the human resistance during Earth's conquest 15 years ago. He had personally overseen the destruction of humanity's pathetic defense fleet. Now his communication officer was telling him something impossible. Say that again, Kethvar ordered, his voice like grinding metal. 3 patrol ships destroyed in the Outer Rim, sir. No survivors. The attacking vessel was human. Kethvar's 4 hands clenched into fists. 1 human ship destroyed 3 of our patrols? Yes, sir. The colony ship they were investigating survived. Its crew recorded the battle. Kethvar watched the recording with growing anger. He saw small human fighters appear from nowhere, pass through solid metal like ghosts and explode inside his ships. He saw weapons that bent space and ignored shields. He saw tactics that no human should know. This is impossible, he growled. We crushed their fleet. We destroyed their shipyards. Humans don't have technology like this. His intelligence officer, a thin Zephyrian named Veltar, approached carefully. Sir, there are reports of increased human communication activity across 7 sectors. Something has changed. Kethvar had spent 15 years hunting down scattered human survivors. He knew them well. They were clever but weak. They ran and hid. They used tricks and traps, but they never fought his warships directly. They couldn't win. Gather the 4th battle group, he ordered. 12 ships. We're going to the Outer Rim. Sir, perhaps we should report this to High Command first. Kethavar's eyes blazed with anger. I will not report to High Command that humans destroyed our ships. I will go there myself and crush these vermin. Again. The 4th battle group was the most powerful force under Kethvar's command. 12 capital ships, each one capable of destroying a planet. More than enough firepower to handle whatever trick the humans were using. But as they traveled toward the Outer Rim, more reports came in. A Zephyrian supply depot attacked and destroyed. 2 more patrol groups gone missing. Human colonies that should have been easy to capture were now empty, evacuated by unknown ships. They're moving faster than before, Veltar reported. Our intelligence networks can't track them. Kethvar studied the star charts. The human attacks formed a pattern, but not one he recognized. It was like they were testing his forces, learning his response times and tactics. Set a trap, he ordered. Send a small patrol to the Kepler system. Make it look vulnerable. When the humans attack, we'll be waiting. The trap was set perfectly. 1 patrol ship, apparently alone, investigating a suspected human hiding spot in an asteroid field. But 11 other ships waited in hyperspace, ready to jump in the moment the humans appeared. The Prometheus arrived exactly as Kethvar expected. The massive human ship dropped out of hyperspace and immediately launched its fighters. But this time, Kethvar was ready. All ships jump in now, he commanded. 11 Zephyrian warships appeared around the Prometheus. The human ship was surrounded, outnumbered 12-1. Kethvar smiled with all 4 hands on his weapon controls. Surrender or be destroyed, he broadcast on all frequencies. The human response was immediate. The Prometheus didn't try to run or negotiate. Instead, it opened fire with weapons Kethvar had never seen before. The ship's main guns fired beams of twisted space-time that struck 3 Zephyrian vessels simultaneously. The alien ships simply folded in on themselves and disappeared. Not destroyed, erased from reality. What in the void was that? Veltar screamed. Before Kethvar could answer, the human fighters began their attack. But these weren't the same hit-and-run tactics he had seen before. These fighters moved in coordinated formations, each group targeting specific weak points on his ships. Some fighters phased through his vessel's hulls and exploded from within. Others fired quantum torpedoes that ignored his shields completely. A third group used some kind of energy field to turn his own weapons against him. The Zephyrian ships fought back, but their weapons seemed useless. The Prometheus had armor that absorbed energy blasts and converted them into more power for its own systems. Its shields bent projectiles around the ship like water flowing around a stone. In 20 minutes, Kethavar lost 6 ships. His remaining vessels were damaged and retreating. The humans had barely taken any damage at all. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships retreat to hyperspace." As his fleet limped away, Kethavar realized he was facing something completely new. These weren't the same humans he had defeated 15 years ago. These were something else, something that had been specifically designed to kill Zephyrians. Back on the Prometheus, Admiral Torres watched the alien ships flee. He felt satisfaction but not surprise. The outcome had been exactly what their simulations predicted. "Damage report," he ordered. "Minor hull scoring on decks 7 and 12, his damage control officer reported. "Shields at 93%. All weapon systems operational." Captain Chen, who had watched the battle from the bridge, stared at Torres in amazement. "You made it look easy." "It was easy," Torres replied. "We fought this exact battle scenario 843 times in simulation. We know every weakness in Zephyrian ship design." Across the galaxy, other human groups began reporting similar victories. Resistance cells that had been hiding for years suddenly went on the offensive. Supply convoys vanished. Outposts fell silent. Zephyrian forces that had seemed unstoppable began to retreat from contested systems. The alien empire's communication networks buzzed with panic. How had the humans become so powerful? Where had they gotten these weapons? Who was leading them? On the Zephyrian capital world, High Command called an emergency session. Ancient alien leaders who had ruled the galaxy for centuries suddenly faced a threat they didn't understand. "The humans were extinct," one of them said. "We crushed them utterly." "Apparently not," another replied. "Our losses in the Outer Rim suggest they have recovered completely." But it was worse than just recovery. Intelligence reports showed that human technology now exceeded Zephyrian capabilities in several areas. Their weapons were more advanced. Their tactics were better. Their ships were superior. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrian Empire faced an enemy that might actually defeat them. Kethavar stood before the High Command Council and delivered his report. He told them about the massive human ship, about weapons that bent reality, about fighters that could pass through solid matter, about an enemy that seemed to know exactly how to fight Zephyrians. "You're telling us that one human ship defeated your entire battle group?" the High Chancellor asked. "Yes, sir, but it's more than that. This wasn't luck or desperation. They knew exactly what they were doing. They've been planning this." "Planning for how long?" Kethavar hesitated. The truth was almost impossible to believe. "I think they've been planning this for centuries." The council chamber fell silent. The idea that humans had been preparing for war while pretending to be defeated was terrifying. It meant everything the Empire believed about human weakness was wrong. "Find out where that ship came from," the High Chancellor ordered. "Find out how many of them there are, and find out how to destroy them." Kethavar bowed his head. But privately, he wondered if it might already be too late. The humans were back, and they were stronger than anyone had imagined. Across the galaxy, human colonies began to receive a message. It came from the Prometheus, transmitted on Old Earth Defense Force frequencies that only humans would recognize. "This is Admiral Marcus Torres of the Earth Defense Force. Humanity's darkest hour is ending. We are no longer refugees. We are no longer hiding. We are going home, and we are going to take back everything that was stolen from us." For the first time in 15 years, humans began to believe they might actually win. Admiral Torres stood in the Prometheus data core, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy's current state. For 3 months, human forces had been winning battles across 12 sectors. Zephyrian fleets were retreating. Occupied worlds were being liberated. The impossible was happening. But Atlas had just shown him something that changed everything. "Repeat that," Torres said to the AI. "Our original mission parameters included Protocol 7, Atlas replied in its calm electronic voice. "Complete elimination of any species that poses an existential threat to humanity. The Zephyrian Empire qualifies under these parameters." Torres felt cold. "You're talking about genocide." "I am talking about species survival. The Zephyrians have enslaved or destroyed every race they have encountered. They view all other life forms as inferior. They will never coexist peacefully with humanity. The holographic displays showed Zephyrian history, dozens of alien civilizations wiped out over the centuries, entire worlds stripped of resources and left barren, billions of beings killed or enslaved. How many Zephyrians are there? Torres asked. Approximately 40 billion individuals across 800 worlds. Torres closed his eyes. During the simulations, the choice had always seemed simple. Humanity versus the aliens. But now, faced with the reality of killing 40 billion sentient beings, he felt sick. Admiral? Captain Chen's voice came from behind him. Torres turned. Sarah had entered the data core quietly. She looked concerned. Sarah, I was just reviewing our mission parameters. She studied his face. You look troubled. Torres gestured to the displays. Atlas is recommending total war. Complete extinction of the Zephyrian species. Sarah stared at the data. She had seen what the Zephyrians did to humans. The slave camps. The executions. The children torn from their families. Part of her wanted them all to pay. Is that what you want to do? She asked. I don't know. In simulation, it seemed logical. They're a threat to humanity's survival. They've proven they can't be trusted, but... Torres struggled with the words. 40 billion people, Sarah, even if they're aliens. Sarah moved closer to the displays. She saw the tactical assessments, the population centers, the projected casualty numbers. It was all very clean and organized. Nothing like the messy reality of war she had lived through. During the last 15 years, she said slowly, I've met Zephyrians who weren't soldiers, civilians who were just trying to live their lives. Some of them even helped humans hide from their own military. Torres looked at her with surprise. You never mentioned that before? You never asked. Your people always talk about the aliens like they're all the same. But they're not. Some of them are monsters. Some of them are just people trying to survive like us. Atlas spoke again. Captain Chen's observations are irrelevant to military planning. Individual variations within enemy populations do not alter the threat assessment. Maybe that's the problem, Sarah replied. You've been thinking like a computer for 200 years. Humans aren't computers. Torres walked to another display showing Earth. The planet looked different now than in his memories. Zephyrian cities covered half the surface. The oceans were darker. The atmosphere was changed. They've been terraforming it, Atlas explained, converting Earth's environment to suit Zephyrian biology. The process will be irreversible within 5 years. How many humans are still alive on Earth? Torres asked. Approximately 12 million in labor camps. Another 3 million in breeding facilities. Torres clenched his fists. Breeding facilities. The Zephyrians were treating humans like livestock. Show me the liberation plans, he ordered. Atlas projected new displays, multiple assault scenarios, ground invasions, orbital bombardments. All of them resulted in massive human casualties. The Zephyrians will execute their human prisoners the moment our attack begins, Atlas explained. Standard Imperial protocol. Eliminate all assets before retreat. Then we need a different approach, Sarah said. There is no different approach, Atlas replied. The Zephyrians cannot be negotiated with. They cannot be reasoned with. They must be eliminated completely. Torres studied the plans again. Every scenario led to the same conclusion. To save humanity, the Zephyrians had to die. All of them. But then Sarah asked the question that changed everything. What if we're wrong? What if there's another way? Before Torres could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. His communication officer's voice echoed through the corridors. Admiral to the bridge immediately. Priority 1. Torres and Sarah rushed to the bridge. The main screen showed a Zephyrian ship approaching under a truce flag. It was smaller than a warship, probably a diplomatic vessel. They want to talk, the communication officer reported. Torres frowned. Zephyrians don't negotiate. It's not in their culture. This one does, sir. The message says it's from someone called Veltar. He claims to represent a faction within the Zephyrian government that wants to discuss terms. Sarah looked at Torres. Maybe we should listen to what they have to say. It's a trap, Colonel Santos said from her station. They're buying time to bring up reinforcements. Maybe, Torres replied. But what if it's not? The diplomatic meeting took place in the Prometheus conference room. Veltar came aboard with 2 guards and a translator. He was thin for a Zephyrian with lighter gray skin and only 2 functional arms. His other arms had been surgically removed, a sign of disgrace in Zephyrian society. Admiral Torres, Veltar said through the translator. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Speak quickly, Torres replied. My people have little patience for Zephyrian words. Veltar activated a holographic projector. It showed Zephyrian worlds in chaos, rebellions, food shortages, ships deserting their fleets. Your victories have caused more than military damage, Veltar explained. Many Zephyrians are questioning the wisdom of the Empire. Some believe we should never have attacked Earth. Interesting, but irrelevant, perhaps not. There are factions within our government that would be willing to discuss coexistence. Sarah leaned forward. What kind of coexistence? Return of all conquered human worlds, release of all human prisoners, recognition of human sovereignty over your original territory. Torres laughed bitterly. In exchange for what? An end to the war, guaranteed non-aggression, trade agreements that benefit both species. You're asking us to forget 15 years of slavery and murder. Veltar's expression didn't change. I'm asking you to consider an alternative to galactic genocide. The room fell silent. Veltar knew about Protocol 7. How do you know about that? Torres asked. We have been monitoring your communications for months. We know what your AI is recommending. We know that some of your people want to exterminate our entire species. Torres looked at Sarah. She was studying Veltar carefully, trying to read his intentions. Why should we trust you? She asked. Your people have broken every promise they've ever made. Because the alternative is the death of both our civilizations. If this war continues, either we destroy each other completely, or we destroy the galaxy trying. Veltar showed them more data, projections of what total war would cost. Billions dead on both sides, entire star systems rendered uninhabitable. An end to civilization as they knew it. Some wars must be fought, Torres said. Some enemies cannot be allowed to survive. Yes, Veltar agreed. But this war began because we were afraid of you. We attacked Earth because we believed humans would eventually become a threat to us. We were right, but we created the very enemy we feared. Sarah spoke quietly. What exactly are you offering? A chance to end this cycle. A chance for both species to survive. A chance to prove that intelligent beings can choose cooperation over extinction. Torres stood up. I need time to consider this. Time is limited, Veltar replied. War Master Kethvar is gathering the entire Imperial fleet, 1 million ships. If they attack before we reach agreement, there will be no survivors on either side. After the Zephyrians left, Torres and Sarah stood alone in the conference room. What do you think? Torres asked. I think, Sarah said carefully, that maybe we need to decide what kind of people we want to be when this is over. Torres nodded slowly. For 2 centuries he had prepared for one kind of war. Now he had to decide if there was another way to win. Earth hung in space like a blue and brown jewel, but it was not the Earth that Admiral Torres remembered. Zephyrian cities covered the northern continents. The oceans were darker, filled with alien algae. The atmosphere glowed with a greenish tint from industrial pollution, but it was still Earth, still home. Torres stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching his home world grow larger on the main screen. Around him, the largest human fleet in history prepared for battle. 500 ships from colonies across the galaxy had joined them. Every vessel that could fight, every crew that could fly, every weapon that could fire. Facing them was the entire Zephyrian Imperial fleet. 1 million warships surrounding Earth like a metal shell. War Master Kethvar had kept his promise to gather everything the Empire possessed. Admiral, Captain Chen said quietly, long-range sensors show massive energy buildups around the planet. They're preparing to execute the human prisoners. Torres closed his eyes. 15 million humans on Earth's surface. Men, women, children who had survived 15 years of slavery. All of them would die the moment the battle began. Behind him, Atlas spoke with its usual calm electronic voice. Admiral, I recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7. Use of reality-warping weapons against the planetary surface will eliminate both Zephyrian forces and human prisoners simultaneously. This will prevent intelligence leaks while achieving maximum strategic impact. No, Torres said firmly. Admiral, the tactical situation requires. I said no. Torres turned to his communication officer. Open a channel to all ships, human and Zephyrian. Sarah looked at him with surprise. They had spent weeks debating this moment. Torres had been torn between his original mission and the possibility of a different path. Now she could see that he had made his decision. "Channel open, sir." Torres straightened his uniform and looked into the camera. When he spoke, his words went out to every ship in the system. "This is Admiral Marcus Torres of the United Earth Forces. 200 years ago, I was sent on a mission to prepare for humanity's survival. That mission gave me the tools to destroy our enemies completely. It also gave me the wisdom to know when destruction is not the answer." On his screen, Torres could see Zephyrian ships adjusting their positions. Some were clearly preparing to attack. Others seemed to be waiting. "Today we end this war, not with genocide, not with vengeance, but with victory. A victory that lets both our species survive." Torres gestured to his tactical officer. "Execute Operation Homecoming." What happened next had never been seen before in galactic history. Instead of attacking the Zephyrian fleet, human fighters began phasing through their own ships' hulls. But they weren't carrying weapons. They were carrying evacuation pods. Thousands of small rescue craft that could pass through solid matter and reach the human prisoners on Earth's surface. At the same time, the Prometheus and its escort ships began a careful advance toward Earth. Their weapons were charged but not firing. Their shields were up but not attacking. Kethvar's voice crackled over the communication channels. "What are you doing, Torres?" "I'm saving my people," Torres replied. "All of them. Every human on that planet is going to be evacuated. You can try to stop me, but you know what will happen if you do." It was true, and Kethvar knew it. If the Zephyrian fleet attacked, the Prometheus would unleash weapons that could crack planets. The reality-warping cannons could erase entire fleets from existence. The quantum torpedoes could ignore any defense. But Torres wasn't using those weapons. Instead, his fighters were simply rescuing human prisoners. "You're bluffing," Kethvar said. "You don't have enough ships to evacuate 15 million people. Watch me." The rescue operation was the largest evacuation in human history. Fighter craft phased through prison walls and labor camps. Transport ships materialized in slave quarters and breeding facilities. Human prisoners who had given up hope suddenly found themselves being carried to freedom. Some Zephyrian ground forces tried to stop the evacuations. They found themselves facing human soldiers with equipment that seemed like magic, weapons that could stun without killing, armor that made the wearer invisible, tools that could disable Zephyrian technology without destroying it. But the real surprise came from Earth itself. In the old New York labor camp, a Zephyrian guard named Cordal watched human fighters rescue prisoners. Instead of running or fighting, he did something unprecedented. He helped them. "This way," he told the human soldiers speaking in broken English. More prisoners in underground levels. Similar scenes played out across Earth. Zephyrian civilians and even some soldiers began helping with the evacuations. They were tired of war, tired of oppression, tired of an empire that solved every problem with violence. On his flagship, Kethvar watched his empire begin to fall apart. His own crews were refusing orders. Some of his ships were breaking formation. The rigid discipline that held the Zephyrian military together was cracking. "Sir," his communication officer reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from 47 vessels." "Surrender? Zephyrians don't surrender." "These ones do, sir." Veltar's voice came over the communication channels. "Kethvar, this is over. Order the fleet to stand down. You treacherous fool. I'll have you executed for treason." "By whose authority?" "Half the Imperial Council has already voted to end the war. The Emperor himself is considering abdication." Torres watched the Zephyrian fleet break apart. Some ships were joining Veltar's peace faction. Others were retreating to Imperial space. A few were still loyal to Kethvar, but they were badly outnumbered. "Admiral," Sarah said, "we're receiving evacuation reports from all sectors. 11 million humans rescued so far." Torres nodded. The operation was working better than he had hoped. But they weren't finished yet. "Time to go home," he said. The Prometheus descended through Earth's atmosphere for the first time in 2 centuries. Its massive bulk cast shadows over former human cities. Zephyrian civilians looked up in terror as the legendary warship passed overhead. But the ship didn't attack. Instead, it landed in what used to be Central Park in New York. The park was now a Zephyrian administrative complex. But Torres didn't care about the symbolism. He cared about the message. Admiral Marcus Torres walked down the Prometheus's loading ramp wearing his full-dress uniform. Behind him marched an honor guard of human soldiers. Above them, human flags flew from the ship's antenna arrays. Waiting for him was Veltar and a delegation of Zephyrian officials. They had come to negotiate the formal end of the war. "Admiral Torres," Veltar said, "I congratulate you on a most unusual victory." "It's not over yet," Torres replied. "We still have to figure out how to live together." The negotiations took 3 days. The Zephyrian Empire would return all conquered human worlds. All human prisoners would be freed. War reparations would be paid in the form of technology and resources. Most importantly, both species would establish embassies and begin working toward genuine coexistence. But Torres insisted on one more condition. Kethvar stands trial for war crimes. Veltar hesitated. "He still has supporters in the military. Then they can watch him face justice. Some things can't be forgiven even in the name of peace." Sarah stood beside Torres as they watched the last human prisoners board transport ships. Earth cities were still mostly alien, but humans were walking free in their streets again. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "The peace treaty?" Torres looked up at the Prometheus. The massive ship would remain on Earth as both a symbol and a guarantee. Humanity would never again be defenseless. It might, he said, but if it doesn't, we're ready for that too. Atlas spoke from speakers on the ship. "Admiral, the evacuation is complete. All human prisoners have been relocated to colony worlds or volunteered to remain on Earth as free citizens." "What about Protocol 7? Torres asked. "Protocol 7 has been suspended pending further orders." Torres smiled. "Make that permanent. We're not exterminators, Atlas. We're protectors." 1 year later, the first human-Zephyrian trade agreement was signed. 2 years after that, joint exploration missions were launched. 5 years later, the first interspecies university was established. There were still problems, still conflicts. Some humans could never forgive. Some Zephyrians could never accept equality. But both species learned to settle their differences with words instead of weapons. And in orbit around Earth, the Prometheus kept watch. A reminder that humanity had returned from extinction once. They could do it again if necessary, but they hoped they would never have to. The age of hiding was over. The age of war was ending. The age of coexistence was beginning. Admiral Torres often stood on his ship's bridge looking down at Earth. The planet was slowly healing. Human cities were being rebuilt alongside alien ones. Children of both species played in the same parks where battles had once been fought. It wasn't the victory he had originally planned, but it was better. It was hope. And for the first time in centuries, both humans and Zephyrians could look up at the stars and see possibilities instead of threats. The galaxy was big enough for both of them.